A specific smell catches you off guard, and suddenly you're not standing where you actually are. You're somewhere from 20 years ago, a place you hadn't thought about in just as long. A song can do something similar. It can feel nostalgic too, but it almost never pulls you backward in time the way a smell does, instantly, without asking permission first. There's a real reason for that gap, and it's not just a feeling, it's wired into you on more than one level, as you're about to see. So here's the actual question. Why does smell reach so much further into your past than anything else you can sense? And why are your other senses comparatively bad at this exact trick? This effect actually has a name, and it comes with a genuinely beautiful story behind it. It's called the Proust phenomenon, after a scene the writer Marcel Proust put into one of his novels over 100 years ago. Here's what happens in it. An adult version of the main character, cold from being outside, gets offered tea by his mother, which isn't something he usually does. He dips a small cake into the tea and takes a bite. A shudder runs through his entire body, and out of nowhere, his whole childhood town comes rising up out of that cup of tea. His aunt's house, the garden, the streets he used to run errands down as a kid. He wrote that the feeling made every hardship in his life suddenly seem unimportant. Like, for 1 second, he stopped feeling, in his words, mediocre, accidental, mortal. All of that from one bite of cake. You might assume that's just one writer being dramatic about dessert. As it turns out, people in actual science were wondering the exact same thing, decades before anyone tested it properly. Back in 1935, a psychologist named Donald Laird noticed that almost nobody in his field was taking smell seriously. At the time, most researchers were obsessed with vision, and even Darwin and Freud had more or less written off the human sense of smell as an afterthought. Laird thought that was a mistake, and he wanted to find out what the human nose could actually do. So he and his colleagues asked over 200 people to write down moments when a smell had suddenly thrown them back into a memory. The stories poured in. A whiff of a certain perfume brought back the discomfort of an awkward dance class. The smell of wool brought back a long-lost uncle's old overcoat. One man, the son of a sawmill worker, wrote that the smell of sawdust brought back, in his words, a series of vivid pictures so graphic that for a moment he was living the scenes again. And here's the detail that matters most. The mere sight of sawdust did absolutely nothing for him. Smell pulled the memory straight out. Sight just sat there. It would take almost 70 more years for someone to actually test this properly under controlled conditions, rather than just collecting stories about it. Her name is Rachel Hertz, and in 2004 she ran an experiment that's almost devious in how simple it is. She picked 3 completely ordinary things: the smell of a campfire, fresh cut grass, and popcorn, and gave each one to people in 3 different forms. Sometimes as the actual smell. Sometimes as a photograph of it. Sometimes as a recording of the sound. Same trigger, 3 different doorways in, and people were simply asked to report whatever personal memory it happened to bring up, whatever that turned out to be. The smell version won every single time for all 3 things she tested. Not in how clear or detailed the memory came back, that part actually came out about equal across all 3 doorways. The difference showed up in how emotional the memory felt once it arrived, both in what people said afterward and in their actual heart rate while they were remembering it. So smell wasn't making the memory sharper or more detailed, it was making it land harder. Now here's where most videos like this start losing people, by rushing through the brain science part in a couple of dense sentences and hoping you keep up. Let's not do that. Let's actually walk through it, slowly, with a picture in your head. Imagine every sense you have as a person trying to get into an exclusive club, and that club is the part of your brain that handles memory and emotion. Sight, sound, touch, and taste all have to stand in the same line and go through the same bouncer. That bouncer is a structure in your brain called the thalamus, and its whole job is to check every single signal before letting it through, deciding what's relevant, what can wait, what gets prioritized. It's not being difficult for the sake of it. That checking process is genuinely useful. It's how your brain avoids getting overwhelmed by every single thing your eyes and ears pick up constantly. Smell doesn't stand in that line. It walks past the bouncer entirely, through a side door that goes almost directly from your nose to the exact same emotional and memory centers everyone else is queuing up for. It's the one sense with what amounts to a backstage pass nobody else was issued. So why does smell get that pass? Picture one of your distant ancestors walking through tall grass tens of thousands of years ago and suddenly catching a faint whiff of smoke, or the specific musk of a predator nearby. In that moment, there's no time to stand in line. There's no time to let a checkpoint carefully weigh the signal against everything else going on. The only useful response is instant. Run now, react now, figure out the details later, if there even is a later. Smell's entire evolutionary purpose was built around that urgency, telling you immediately whether something nearby was food, danger, or a mate. There's actually a second, quieter reason smell ended up so tightly wired to memory, beyond just speed. Neuroscientists studying this point out that for early humans, smell wasn't only a danger alarm, it was also how they kept track of where they'd already been, which berries grew where, which path led back to camp. One researcher put it simply, you can think of the original brain as basically being a sense of smell, plus a sense of navigation, plus a sense of memory, all bundled together, because an animal that can't remember the smells tied to a place can't build a mental map of its world. That's a big part of why those three things, smell, navigation, and memory, still sit so close together in your brain today. Sight and sound, on the other hand, showed up to the evolutionary story much later, and they were handed a much harder job. Recognizing one specific face out of thousands, understanding the actual words someone is saying to you. That kind of complexity needs the checkpoint. It needs time and careful sorting. Smell never had that luxury, and frankly, never needed it. That explains the speed, and it explains why smell hits your emotions so fast and so hard. But it doesn't quite explain something else, something you've probably noticed without ever putting words to it. Think about walking into your grandmother's house years after she's gone and catching one specific familiar smell in the hallway. You're not separately remembering the curtains, and then the wallpaper, and then a conversation you once had at her kitchen table, piece by piece. Like flipping through photographs one at a time. It all arrives at once as one complete, whole scene, almost like it was never broken into separate pieces to begin with. That's because it wasn't. Here's the part that genuinely surprised me while digging into this. Your brain doesn't store a smell as a checklist of separate ingredients, the way it might log a room visually. This color, that shape, this object, all tagged and filed individually. Instead, it blends every part of a smell together into one single, solid signal before it ever even reaches memory. Think of it like a zip file. A photograph stores every detail separately and lets you zoom into any one part of it. A smell gets compressed down into one sealed package first, and your brain only knows how to open that package one way, all at once, completely. And your brain has a neat trick for handling exactly that kind of sealed package. Hand it even a small, partial piece of something it has seen before, and it doesn't just recall that one piece in isolation. It rebuilds the entire original scene around it automatically. The same way hearing just the first 3 notes of a song you haven't heard in 10 years can suddenly bring back the whole room you were standing in when you first heard it, not just the notes themselves. Smell happens to be unusually good at triggering this effect, precisely because it never shows up as a partial fragment in the first place. It shows up as one dense, compressed package, and unpacking it means unpacking everything that was zipped inside it. There's a strange little piece of evidence that backs this up, and it's something you've probably run into without ever naming it. Try right now to describe the smell of rain hitting hot pavement without comparing it to anything else. Not "it smells like rain." The actual smell itself, the way you'd describe a color or a shape in detail, you basically can't do it. Across nearly every language on Earth, people are oddly, consistently bad at putting smells into words. In a way, they're simply not bad at describing what they see or hear. And that tracks perfectly with everything else here. If your brain had broken the smell apart into separate, nameable ingredients the way it does with sight, you'd probably have specific words for those ingredients by now, the same way you have words for shades of red. It never broke it apart. It kept the whole package sealed shut. So go back to that moment a smell caught you off guard and pulled you somewhere you hadn't thought about in years. It wasn't magic, and it wasn't really about the smell being special on its own. It was the one sense in your entire body that was never asked, at any point across its very long evolutionary career, to slow down and get checked at the door, and the one sense that never broke its signal into separate parts to begin with. Everything else you sense had to grow up, learn some manners, and get filed away piece by piece, fact by fact. Smell just walked straight through, fully intact, the same way it always has. The next time that happens to you, you're not imagining how strong it feels, and you're not imagining how complete it feels either. You're feeling the one part of yourself that never learned how to keep its own feelings at arm's length, and never learned how to take a memory apart before handing the whole thing back to you all at once.